I was saying I was born in a little town called New Berlin, New York. It's sort of north of Unadilla. It's on Route 8, New York Route 8. Born in a little farmhouse there. The name of the farm was the Bag Farm. Evidently there was a person by the name of Mr. Bag who owned the farm. And anyway, the house is still standing. I was born in that house. My mother pointed out some room there that I was born in. And so
how far
that
from
was,
Albany is
and it's probably 60 miles or so.
northwest?
South. Southwest. Southwest. Probably between 60 and 80 miles or something like that. Yeah.
I really need you. I know it's tough.
Okay.
I really need you to be
Alright.
looking up at Andy when you're
Okay.
talking.
Stare at my hair.
Okay. So anyway, this building is still standing, and it's now part of a golf course.
Your house?
This house I was born in, and it's part of a golf course, and we've been down there and played golf there. So it's a nice little course next to a little river that goes by there. So then things got pretty bad on the farm, and my father couldn't make ends meet. The price of milk had dropped down.
It was
To
a
the
dairy
point.
farm, right?
It was a dairy farm, and the price of milk had dropped down so that he couldn't meet the mortgage payments. So he looked for a job elsewhere and found one on the D&H Railroad, which
your
is
mother-
now part of Canadian Pacific, I think it is.
And your mom stayed home and took care of you guys, right?
What's that?
Your mom was at the house taking care of you guys.
Yeah, right. And then we eventually moved to Schenectady from there,
Okay.
and have been in Schenectady ever since. So, and we grew up in Schenectady, went to schools in Schenectady. Went to Oneida, or first of all, Franklin Elementary School, and then Oneida Junior High School, and then Knott Terrace High School. And Franklin School now is an apartment building,
Wow.
and the Oneida School is still there and still functioning. But Knott Terrace High, that building was torn down because they said it was unsafe. You should have seen them trying to get that building down. They said it was unsafe. It
that
stayed up
asbestos?
there like a brick wall, boy.
Wow.
But anyway, so they built a new school in Linton High School. That's when our daughters were going to school. So they went to Linton High School. So then
Is it true that it's uphill both ways?
yeah, right, it was uphill. So anyway, I tried to get a scholarship to college, but I lost out to this one gal. She beat me out, got the scholarship, and I didn't, so
Scholarship for what?
I had to look, I wanted to go to Cornell at the time.
Was it through English or?
Well, I
For
think it was
math?
going to be agriculture is what I was
Scholarship.
looking at the time. But then the next best thing was a GE apprentice course. It's a 4-year program, and you became a tool and die maker or a draftsman, whichever phase you picked. I picked the mechanical and went into tool and die making. But because of the war came on, of course, and so we had to work all kinds of overtime. We hardly had any time off. You had to take one day off every 13 days. So it was a lot of steady working. So it meant that instead of 4 years, I was able to go through the course in 2 years. And I graduated from that, and I was a tool and die maker for a while. So then the time come when I was dating Pat King at the time. And I went to my boss because I wanted to find out if I could get married, if I was going to be deferred for the duration of the war. And my boss's name was Paul Lundgren. He says, "Oh, you don't have to worry. You're going to be deferred for the duration. We need tool and die makers." And that. He says, "Why'd you want to know?" I says, "Well, I get married then. You know, I didn't want to get married and then go right into service and all."
Right.
So anyway, that I got a letter from my brother who was already in the Army. He actually had enlisted in the Air Force, but pretty soon they moved him out of Keesler Field in Biloxi, Mississippi, and he went to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, into the infantry, and he was real mad because he wanted to be in the Air Force. So when he wrote home, he said, "Whatever you do, try to get in the Navy if you have to go in." I said, "Well, I'm going to be deferred for the duration, so I don't have to worry." We've been married maybe 4 or 5 months, and a little card came in the mail from Uncle Sam saying I was 1A. In other words, I had to go into service. So I went down to my boss, Paul Lundgren, spoke to him about it. And he says, "They can't do this to you." I say, they're doing it. He said, "Well, let me make a phone call." He calls up, and all of a sudden he's saying, "Well, yes, sir. Oh, okay, sir. Yes, sir." He hangs up the phone. I knew what he was going to say. No luck. He says, "Well, Stan, looks like you have to go into service." He says, "Well, okay." So I know I have to go into the Navy. My brother said, you know, to try to get in the Navy, and I had to find out how to go about getting into the Navy. And I was told to take this Eddie test. And if you pass the Eddie test, you would be insured of getting into the Navy. Well, I went down and spoke to the recruiter down. He happened to be stationed in the post office in Schenectady. So I went down and talked with him. And I said, "What is this Eddie test about?" He says, "Well, it's an electronic program." And he says, on radio, you learn about radio and that. I said, "Yeah, but I know nothing about a radio." And he says, "Oh, you don't have to worry about that." He says, "If you have the background, we'll teach you the radio." So I took the test, and it was about 100 questions divided up into 5 categories. And physics was one of them, and electricity, and shop, and a number of things that I just had on the apprentice course. So that was a breeze. But when it come to the questions on radio, I was lost. But fortunately, the test was a multiple test program where they had 5 answers, and you had to pick the right answer if you could. Well, most of it I could do pretty well, but the radio, I had to sort of flounder around on that one and say something, you know, if there was some Latin word or something, and then I knew that was 5 and had something to do with 5. So I sort of was guessing at all the different answers. Well, to make a long story short, a couple weeks later I got a notice in the mail saying that I passed the test and that I bring that with me, and that would assure me getting into the Navy when I was inducted. So they came for induction and went over to Albany to the, what they call an armory. There's an old armory there, and it's still standing, I believe. Went to that armory, and there was probably 100 of us at the time. And we're all lined up, and finally the man says, "How many of you here passed the Eddie test?" In fact, he says, "Those of you that passed the Eddie test, take one step forward." And he says, you will be in the Navy, and the rest are in the Army." So there was about 5 of us, and we stepped forward, and I was in the Navy. So all the other guys there, they were grumbling, you know, they would be in the feeder for the infantry and all that, so, you know, they didn't look forward to that. But my one buddy that I used to pal around with during the apprentice course, Hank Kaczynski.
Hang on, Grandpa.
Okay.
All right, looking right at Andy. Here we go.
My buddy's name was Hank Kaczynski, and he ran up to the desk there, and he pounded on the desk, and he says, "Geez, I got to get in the Navy. My father was in the Navy. My grandfather was in the Navy." And I overheard him saying all this, and I was laughing because his father might have been in the Polish Navy because they came over from Poland. So anyway, we got dressed and went up to the lobby, and we're sitting in the lobby. And off the lobby on the periphery were all these offices. One door here, one door here. And to this day I can remember seeing Hank come out of one door, going into another door, come out the door, go into another. Finally he comes over to me, Stan, I'm in the Navy, I'm in the Navy. So he was really persistent and got in the Navy. Not only that, he was a draftsman. He took the drafting program on the apprentice course. So he ended up going to Annapolis, Maryland, and he spent all the time at a drawing board, like what he would normally be doing at work. So he made out real well. Unfortunately, when he came home, he didn't live too long. He found a tumor on his brain or something. He had already been married and all, so it was really a sad case. So he passed on. So anyway, that's got me into the Navy, and I spent about almost 2 years in the Navy, and then came back to, well, I think we were discharged down at Bayonne, New Jersey.
Were you on one boat the whole time?
I was on a ship, I was on an aircraft carrier, and the aircraft carrier was a brand new one. It had been finished in October of 1945. And this was 1946, in the early part of 46, when we were going on a shakedown cruise down to Guantanamo Bay, and you've probably heard about Guantanamo Bay. And we then got orders to go on down to Rio de Janeiro. So that was real interesting because it meant we crossed the equator. And when you cross the equator for the first time in the Navy, you go through what they call a rickets. You go to King Neptune's court, and you're guilty of something, polluting the air or something. I don't know. They always had some crazy thing. And so then we had to go through the rickets and be anointed with oil, machine oil they put on their hair. And
Induction into the true Navy.
yeah. So anyway, that went on for a couple days because on board the carrier there's 4,000 to 5,000 of us, and of that group, I think there were 300 that were what were called shellbacks, had been across the equator once before. So all the rest of us had to be indoctrinated. So they had a thing going for two days. And what they did is they raised up the elevator platform, one of the elevators. And on that platform, they had King Neptune's court, and you had to go through that. And then you ended up having to go into a tank of water, and it flip you over. And in the water was all garbage and stuff there. So you come out of that looking pretty bad. But they had a shower available, so you could run through the shower afterward and wash off the garbage. So that was the story of the Navy. Of course, I was in, all the time the war was going on, I was in classes. So for a whole year, I was taking tests every Saturday and going through all these classes. Like, started out in Chicago, pre-radio, then to Gulfport, Mississippi, and got a 3-month program there, and then to Corpus Christi, Texas, where that turned out about 6-7 months there. So I was in Corpus Christi longer than any of those other places. So that was the Navy story. Came back and I was discharged in about, let's see, I have to think about this one, 44. Yeah, I went in 44 and came out in 46. So it was around April 46 when I came out of the service. And since I had a job previously with GE, I could go right back to the same job. They would keep the job for you, so I went back to tool and die making. But eventually I went into the office and did office work and got into manufacturing engineering, and that's how I got to go to Pittsfield, because they had too many manufacturing engineering people, so they started laying off, and so I ended up going to Pittsfield. And I started out with the Polaris program there in the ordnance department of GE. But the boss there, he claimed that after 6 months, if I went to see him, that he would look at my schedule and all and see about giving me a raise. So the 6 months come and I went to him and he turned me down. So I said, well, okay. I ended up calling up my friend that I had known who worked in the power transformer department. That was also in Pittsfield. And he says, oh yeah, they're looking for somebody. He says, I said, geez, I'd like to try for the job. So he says, all right, I'll speak to the boss. And he did, and I went there. And I had a portfolio showing all the things that I worked on and everything, and pictures and all. This is something they showed us in Schenectady when we were looking for work. You know, they said, if you have this helps a lot. So I took that portfolio, brought it to the boss there. Buckwalter was his name, Bob Buckwalter. And I interviewed him, and geez, you could see like his eyes were popping out of his head, you know, as he's looking at all the stuff that I had worked on, and mainly was tool and die making, you know. But then I was into some of the other stuff too that was something that would work along pretty much and help me in the work that I was going for. So he says, yeah, you don't have to worry, you got the job. So I says, okay, thanks a lot. So I left the ordnance and went to transformer, and then I was there ever since until I retired. I retired in December of 1983. And that was, well, it was a good time. I remember when we had the meeting. There was about 20 of us that were retiring. So they had a program where they brought in speakers and they spoke about different things of retirement. And this one in particular said that one thing you're going to notice, he says, and it happens to everybody, it's a traumatic experience.
How near ready are you?
You're really,
Oh, you're in the middle of it, huh?
Yes.
You about ready for lunch?
Yes.
We will be
So-
after this. We'll take
Yeah.
a break. Cool, Grandma.
Okay.
okay, can I go back to that?
Yeah.
This will be, I had the punchline.
Yeah. No.
Traumatic
let's start back.
experience.
Say that statement again. Your friend
My,
or your
this
counselor, or what he told you.
this speaker said that, retirement is a traumatic experience. Well, that was in December of 1983, and here it is, 2007. I'm still waiting for the trauma. So, that's the story there. And so I worked there for,
Not to go back too far, but you said you were married before you started the Navy, right?
yeah. So
So,
I was
Did you-
married.
during the Navy time, did you have correspondence? Were you able to write letters back? and
Oh yeah,
forth?
we wrote letters back and forth, and she was there. She visited me this one time when I was down in Gulfport, Mississippi, and of course she was pregnant too while I was in the service. But when I got home, there was some problem or something. I don't know. They didn't like the looks of things, so she went to the hospital, and the baby was a stillbirth. It was a boy, so that was my only chance for a boy. So the way that worked out is I was late getting to the new place there in Virginia, where we had this course to take. We graduated from the secondary course down in Corpus Christi, Texas, and then this was another course that I was taking in Norfolk, Virginia. Well, getting to Norfolk, Virginia from Texas, I figured that there would be a ferry boat there, and I would be able to get to Norfolk in time. Well, it didn't work out. There wasn't a ferry boat there at that time, so I ended up getting to the base there probably 3 or 4 hours late. And that's AWOL, absent without leave. So I was wondering what's going to happen there. So when I finally got to the head person there, he was a retired Lieutenant JG from the Air Force. He was still in the Navy, but he was retired from the Air Force for some reason or other. And he headed this program, and he's the one that talked to me about being late. He says, well, you have to do your own figuring out for the program. You have to look it up in the book. It says there's no excuse for being late. And so you were late. So he says, we'll have to punish you. And so he brings in the fellow that does all the paperwork there for the group. He brought him in, and he says, how much do the leave rations amount to? And he says, oh, $7 and something, I don't know. He says, okay, that'll be this man's full punishment. Take his leave rations away from him. I never knew the difference, So what? So anyway, I got done talking with him about that, and he was bawling me out and everything, and I should read the Navy book. And they have a thick Navy book. He's supposed to know all the rules and regulations. And So he said, let's see, yeah, the leave rations are going to be taken away. But my wife was pregnant and she was due any time, you know, so I says, oh, by the way, sir, my wife is pregnant and she's due any time. I was wondering if I could get an emergency leave. After getting all balled out, and he sort of smiled. He says, yeah, he said, well, why don't you call up and see how things are going and then let me know? And he says, I'll give you 10 days, you know, emergency leave. And then if you have any problem or that, just call and we can extend it. So I don't know whether he suspected there was going to be a problem or not, but it turned out that I had to take another 5 days. Ended up 15 days I took. And it, of course, turned out to be a stillbirth, so. Yeah, that
So
was
that
our
was-
one and only boy.
That was 45?
That was in 19, let's see, I have to stop and think. I came out in 46. Yeah, that was in October of 45. October 45, when that happened. So that's,
So you already, did you have this house by then, or did
yeah,
you have
we,
a house in Schenectady?
not by then, because we still hadn't, in fact, when I came back, we had to find a place to live. And this fellow lived next door to my folks on Foster Avenue. We used to live at 1640, 1638, and that was my folks' address. But then I talked to the fellow that lived next door, who was a relative of Pat's. It was her aunt that lived there, and her husband was talking to me this one day, and he says, well, you're looking for a place, Stan, go up to the hospital. People are dying every day. And geez, you can find a house like that, you know. So I said, yeah. Next thing I know, he has some complication or something. He had Bright's disease, some kidney disease. And about a week later, he died. So, as it turns out, his wife decided to go to Keuka Lake to work at this college. So she was going to leave that flat empty. So we took that flat and moved into it. But it was ironic that he happened to say something about somebody dying. And here he's the one that died. So really strange.
Let's go back a little bit to your childhood for a minute, because you grew up with. Let's talk about your brothers. How many were in your family? And I hear there are rumors that there were certain parents that wanted their sons to stay away from the Deforest boys.
Oh, well, you want to hear that story?
Oh,
I
yeah.
can tell you that. Yeah.
So let's go back
There-
and just tell me your brothers and their names and
Yeah.
where you fit into those.
All right.
Start off with, and of course, look right at Andy.
Yeah. What, I have two brothers. Durward is the one next to me. I'm the oldest in the family. And then I have a sister, she was the next oldest. And then another brother, Ronnie. And so, actually, Ronnie was a lot younger, so I played mainly with my older brother. So, anyway, look at Andy.
Sorry, Grandpa. I just
So-
gotta keep it consistent.
So anyway, we played and got into lots of activities, and there was one boy that we used to play with. Buddy Barker was his name. Well, his mother always cautioned him about playing with us, because it seems every time he played with us, he got involved in some activity that was conducive to your health. So she cautioned him about going with us. She says, I don't want you going across the railroad tracks. And this one day we decided we're going to cross the railroad tracks, but not only that, we're going to go crawl over the bridge and go over to this creek, a little creek there where we could go skinny dipping. So we went in that creek and we were swimming and having a nice time. It was a nice warm day. And all of a sudden I looked up and there's his mother coming over the hill, walking towards us. He says, "Hey buddy, there's your mother." "Oh my God," he says. He runs out quick. He's trying to get his clothes on, and his mother's grabbing him and hitting him. "I thought I told you to stay away from those Deforest boys. I told you not to go across the tracks. Not only that, you went across the tracks, you went across the river." So she really, she lit into him. And so it always happened that when he was with us, there was some problem. And this one time later on, this was some years later, we were picking berries. We used to go on our bicycles out to a place called Kill Road, and they had a nice berry farm there, especially the raspberries. They were really great. And I remember one morning I picked 64 quarts, and at 4 cents a quart, so a little over $2. That was big money back in those Depression days. So anyway, Buddy was with us this one day picking the berries. So we got all done picking berries and we're heading home. And we're going down this Consol Road, and it had like a little hill. And Buddy was riding we were riding our bikes, and Buddy was coming in and going out like that, you know, he go in like so. And the only thing is we hooked up somehow or other. The bikes got tangled together, and he let go of the handlebars. I just hung on. I said, "Jesus, whatever is going to happen, it'll happen." Well, he flew over the handlebar, landed on the concrete, and I stopped, and so we went back there, and he's screaming about his head. "Oh, my head, oh, my head." And my brother said, "Look there, and there's a little blood there on this leg." And what happened is, evidently, he went over such a way that fender scooped a piece of meat right out of the back of his leg. And you could see like all the muscle and everything there. And so my brother says, "Geez, bud, wow." Well, he forgot all about his head when he saw that, because it was a section of meat that was gone, about 2 by 3 or so, you know, and it was down for about a quarter of an inch or so. It was gone, you know. Jeez. So then he really started screaming. So fortunately, we were right by a house, and this fellow was outside or something, and he heard the commotion. He come over. Said, "Gee, we'd like to take him to the hospital, but we can't, you know, handle him on the bike." He says, "Oh, I'll take you." So he took my brother and Buddy in the car, and then I, with the bike, went to the hospital. I went by the hospital on the way to his house because I had to go speak to his mother.
How'd she take the news?
So I got to his house, and she comes to the door. "Oh my Lord, what's happened to Buddy? I haven't even said a word." I said, "See, Mrs. Barker, I'm sorry. We got in a little accident with our bikes, and he got a cut on his leg, and he had to go to hospital. I think they're stitching it up." Oh my God, Buddy, he's going to die, he's going to die. No, he's not going to die, he's in good hands. The fellow took him in a car and took my brother and him to the hospital, so that's where he is. So anyway, she finally thanked me. Then, of course, she didn't have any car. They didn't have a car in the family. A lot of people didn't have cars. But she had a relative that did have a car, and they picked her up and brought her up to the hospital and got things straightened out. But she, it seemed every time Buddy was with us that something happened. Oh.
Let's tell us. Let's go get a little bit about your parents since we're on your childhood.
My father?
Yeah,
my
father
father
and your
were-
mother.
My father, my mother was a homebody. She really stayed at home. She didn't care about traveling or anything like that. On the other hand, my father would like to go on traveling to different places because he worked on the railroad, and on the railroad you got these special passes where you could ride free, you know. So he was always looking to get something. They did end up going to Florida this one time, so I was really surprised that they took that time to go to Florida. But as far as having picnics and things like that, we didn't have it in our family at that time. Because my father was gone working, or he wasn't home much of the time, just my mother was home. So we used to fend for ourselves, and pretty much did that by going to different places around the area where we knew there was swimming and that, so we could do some swimming and so forth. And my father, we knew he worked on the railroad, and of course at that time the roundhouse was right nearby, you know, Foster Avenue. You just had to walk several blocks and you come to the roundhouse, which was another interesting thing because that had a turntable, and they used to bring the engine in and turn the table and put it in one of the stalls in the roundhouse. So we actually saw that, and my father had a job at one time working on a local engine where he was doing just the local work, what they call local, going to little villages and that are around the area, picking up cars and moving them around and all that. And a couple times we were able to, he took us up on the engine and saw him, you know, working. And what a job that was, because they had you had the engine, and then you had the coal part of it, the other half of the engine. Well, they were separate, and they had a plate over the connection there, so you couldn't really see the connection. And that's what the fireman stood on to handle the coal. He would go into the coal box, get coal, throw it into the little hole where, you know, where the fire was. So that was work, boy. The firemen earned their money back then. Of course, then they came out with diesels, and the diesels, all they had to do was turn switches and so forth. So that was pretty easy. Eventually, my father ended up becoming an engineer and was able to run the engines. And he got some jobs where he would go to Wilkes-Barre from Schenectady and have a long freight, generally about 100 cars they'd be pulling. So it was real interesting. But that was his job, which he did. He loved the railroad. Once you get the railroad in your system, I guess it's hard to get out. My young brother Ronnie ended up in the railroad, but he worked on the office and did office work, what they call yard clerk, and he used to look at the cars and get their numbers and mark them down so that they keep track of where the engines or where the train was going and so forth. is there any more you want to know?
That's good. Anything you think is relevant, about your parents that
Yeah.
you'd want next generations to know, about your lineage.
Did they play any instruments or?
No, we had an old piano, an old upright piano in the house. We used to bang around on that thing, and we had to finally get rid of it. But boy, what a job that was, tearing that up. We had a axe and we're trying to bust it. Boy, that wood was hard wood. It was really hard. Well, we finally got it all broken apart and did away with it. But my mother and father, because my father's job switched to Binghamton, they had to go and live in Binghamton for a while. So we used to go on trips once in a while to go see them while they were in Binghamton.
How old were you guys at that point?
What's that?
How old were you?
Oh, yeah, we were married. We were married and had kids because we'd bring the kids on a trip. And they always would holler, "How soon is it we're going to be to Grandma's?" Because they used to have to stop and try to go to the bathroom and that. But they generally would say, "Oh, we can hold it, we can wait," And so they end up, when they got to Grandma's, they'd run in the house and, "Gotta go to the toilet."
Cool. Tell us the. Let me just see.
Should we do lunch?
Do what?
Quick.
What?
Do lunch quickly?
No. Well, yeah, in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Let me see. I heard a rumor too that there's a story that you would know about green balls.
Oh, yeah.
You wanna tell
Sunday
that?
afternoon was the
Go
green
ahead.
ball time.
Go ahead. Hang on. Look right in, Andy. Here we go. Go ahead.
Sunday afternoon was green ball time, and that's, of course, we were brought up in the Depression days, so there wasn't much money. So once in a while they'd have a little money, and in the afternoon we'd say, "Hey, Pa, can we have some money to go get green balls?" There's a penny candy store just about a half a block from where we lived, so, and it was an old Jewish fellow that ran it. Mitch was his name. And but he was real nice. He treated us real good. Every time we walked in, he knew we were looking for the green balls. He said, "Yeah, I just got another shipment the other day." He says, "Your luck, we got green balls." So we get those.
They big jawbreakers or?
Yeah, they're round, about so round, and they were hard. It was peppermint, green peppermint. So that we always liked them. They had other candy too, but we seemed to go for the green balls. They lasted longer.
When did you start playing the fiddle?
Well, I played the fiddle probably, I was living on Foster Avenue, and I don't know, I was maybe 14, 15 years old, I guess, when I started playing the fiddle. And that's, I say it's the fiddle because, the violin you have to learn all positions, which I never did, because my father, I took for 1 year, and that was it. The money ran out after that, so I couldn't go any further. And so I just played in the first, what they call the first position. And they had 1, 2, 3, 4, they have 4 or 5 positions on the fiddle there. You're supposed to learn, but I never did. So I was limited in what I could play. But I did end up getting into the high school orchestra, not Terrace High School Orchestra, and I played second fiddle. And you know what second fiddle is? E, 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 e. So I never did get to play the melody at all. So I can always say I was in the high school orchestra, playing second fiddle. Yeah.
What were, the kid, the story about the kid is great, but anything else about you and your brothers, like just that you enjoyed doing? Any stories you remember as far as like, being out and playing a lot, or something happened, or
You
something
guys
like
have
that?
sports that you like?
Yeah.
I mean, and you could talk about your relationship to your brothers. I mean, you guys are pretty close.
Yeah, well, I was close with Durd, because he was close to my age. But Ronnie was several years younger, and he had his own group of fellows he played with. So we didn't play too much together there with them, but there with my brother, we had a bicycle. And the bicycle we earned by working for my father. He sold eggs. So we go around the street and eventually got a clientele, people that wanted my father's eggs, because he candled every egg. You know what candling is? Candling, you have a can with a light on it, and you put that to the light, and you can look and see if there's any dark spot. If there's a dark spot, that's not a good egg. There's something wrong with it. So they knew he candled all his eggs, and they were sure to get a dozen eggs to be real good. So we had a automatic, it wasn't automatic. I mean, we had a sled. Can't think of the name of it now, but it was a popular sled at that time. And we used to strap the egg crate right onto the sled.
Was it a red flyer?
Flexible flyer was what it was. And so we used that sled there to go around in the wintertime. During spring and fall and that, we had auto wheel coaster wagon. And so we brought the wagon around sold the eggs. So we used to make some money like that, and then eventually got enough so I could buy a bicycle. And then once I get the bike, man, we were on the bike most all the time. Going up the hill with everything. That was really good exercise.
Do you and Dee shared the bike?
What was that?
You and Dee shared the bike?
Yeah, we shared the bike until eventually they got enough money to get another bike. Yeah, it was an old Ivor Johnson bike, I remember. Narrow tires. Oh, we put a lot of miles on that one.
How about your relationship to Aunt Eleanor, your sister?
Yeah, well, we didn't see much of her only at supper time or when we got back from our activities.
So she wasn't a
Because
tomboy.
we used to play football, shoes up football, I mean tackle football. We had no equipment or whatever. And we had some experiences that were hard to believe. In fact, we had one where a fellow Italian boy took a center line plunge. And a big mob of us all over, we all piled, and he comes up, he's, I can't see. We looked, and his eyeball was all white, like, the pupil was gone, like. So what's going on? And his brother comes up to him, he said, Mario, and he's banging like that. And all of a sudden, boing, it came around. And he was able to see again. So, jeez. And years later, I saw his brother there. And I said, whatever happened to Mario there, his eye? Did he ever have an eye problem? And he says, oh, you mean from that football accident? I said, yeah. He says, no, you know, it's strange. He lives in California now, but he said he never had any problem with that eye. Imagine that. See? Holy smoke. We couldn't believe it, you know. So then afterward, they're all kidding. They're saying, hey, Mario, what did you see inside?
Excellent. It's a good place to stop.
Yeah, then we used to play hockey in the wintertime, and of course we played, so you're never supposed to lift the puck. And we had a regulation puck. Somebody was able to get a puck somewhere. Okay, so so we used to choose up teams and play, and so just remember now, no lifting. So I happen to be in the goaltender, and this one kid comes barreling down. He got by everybody, and he's going for me, you know, and I'm trying to wait, see what he's going to do. Zoom! Yeah! Come right up and hit me in the eye, right here. Jeez. Well, you know, in the funny sheets where it shows people getting hit over the head and stars, and you see all the moons, and that's just what you see. That's what I saw. All these things popping around, and oh man. I managed to stay on my feet. I felt kind of faint, you know, like it's going to fall down, but I didn't. And so they're trying to get some ice and put on it, and of course there's a lot of ice around. We're skating on the ice. But when I got home, my mother looked at me, she says, what happened to you? Oh man, I puffed up like a balloon. See? So I had to keep putting ice on it, and eventually the swelling went down. But we had all kinds of things like that happening.
No wonder we ever survived.
You wonder how we ever survived. My mother, I don't think, ever knew what we were doing, you know, because when I come home that time with the big, she didn't know what happened. I said, well, I got hit with a puck, you know, and that's why it's all swelled up and bloody, and oh, jeez.